And that's when I realized that Wu-Tang may not be for the children.
Woo, that's right. Dollar bills, y'all. Welcome, everybody, to another exciting episode of the UnDisrupted Podcast. Just you caught us in the middle of a very heated conversation about the classic late 80s.
Nursery rhymes. Yeah.
Nursery rhymes, late 80s rap. Exactly. Okay, Adam. First debate. Let's talk about this. This is something that's been interesting. So as I go around the country, and I talk to a lot of schools, so do you, it's we're brought in usually to help with tech integration. So the question is, do you think you should choose, if you had to choose between one of these two things, would you spend more of your professional learning time focusing on the integration of technology, or would you spend more of your professional learning time focusing on pedagogical strategies?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's something I've tossed and turned about, trying to figure out what would be the best solution. I'm gonna lean on more of the pedagogy, because when I look at educators, I mean, pedagogy trumps anything. So if the network's down, if the budget cuts happen and you don't have technology, your pedagogy, you fall back on your pedagogy. I think with any tech tool, pedagogy is king. You got to know what you're doing with the tech, because you can have all the tech skills in the world, but if you don't have that pedagogy, then you may kind of fall flat with that. I mean, that's just my thought, but what do I know?
I can kind of agree with that somewhat. I'll take the counter just to be controversial here and say that yes, I do see people that have great pedagogical strategies, and that's great and that's awesome. I think of a lot of master teachers out there that do that. However, when it comes to that tech integration, that future planning, whatever it is, integration of AI, whatever it is, they sometimes tend to rest on their laurels. And so, yes, it's awesome to have pedagogical strategy, because you can really do anything with it. Like you said, it trumps pretty much anything. You can use that for whatever strategies you want to. However, I think, with the bleeding edge of AI, and I know we usually try to wait at least 20 minutes into the show before we say it, but we said it early today. You got to have some awareness of this. I don't know what the latest research says, but I know that, as of last year, there was like 35% of staff or something that have had any type of training on AI itself. And it's been out. I mean, we're 2.5 years in now of the generative movement, at least. So, but you know what? Enough about what we think, Adam. We
know somebody who's been knee deep in this, from the beginning. Let's go ahead and bring up Joseph South. How's it going?
Hey, good to see you too.
Joseph is the Chief Innovation Officer at ISTE ASCD. Where do you stand on this, Mr. South? Where are you feeling?
Oh, man.
Integration, or?
I mean, so first of all, we just brought together an edtech association with the pedagogy association.
Funny. Yeah.
ISTE. See what we did there?
Yeah. So you're like asking me to choose between like two children here. I'm going to lean towards pedagogy, but it cannot be old school pedagogy. Like, we really need to stay on top of what's coming out now, because the latest pedagogy is going to lean you towards the right ways to use technology. I mean, when my kid was in the 4th grade, they sent him home to do online math practice, and after clicking through 800 screens, he got to a PDF worksheet, right? And I'm like, okay, we need some pedagogy here. Yeah. So I'm going to go for pedagogy.
Hard for me to debate that.
I mean, you can't go wrong with either. And that's the thing. This is a no-win scenario, because you got to have both. You got to have both.
You do.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. With that being said, AI is the buzzword. In our circles, we hear it so much. I know in your position, it is something that you've been a part of, and you've been doing a lot of work in that space. So what are things that we can do, or schools can do, to ensure that AI is more of a co-pilot and not necessarily Microsoft Copilot, but AI is more of a co-pilot than an autopilot in the classroom?
I'm so glad you asked that. So, first of all, I think we need to make sure we have the right framing about AI. And, one of the framings that really concerns me is AI is going to make our work more efficient. And it absolutely does that. And that is a good thing. I've heard, educators have said to me, hey, I got my Sunday nights back because I use AI now. And I'm like, all right, well, who's going to argue with that, right? There's no arguing against getting some time back with your family on a Sunday. That said, not everything that we do should be accelerated. There's a lot of things we're doing that we probably shouldn't even be doing. And so I think we have to shift the framing from not just being about efficiency, but also being about how we transform the learning. And one way that I talk about that is, we are right now educating the next generation of AI designers. These are the people who are going to make the AI that we use when we're sitting in our, easy chairs sipping tea. And they're only going to be able to do that if they think of AI as a tool that they can build with. And so that's where, this idea of co-intelligence that Ethan Mollick talks about, we're helping young people learn the co-intelligence role with AI. And if we use that framing, then they're going to be AI creators and designers now, not just in the future, but now.
I do worry about that with that rapid acceleration of the fact that, maybe we skip some steps of ethical training or skip some steps that, and as you just said it, we're giving them the foundational skills now that are going to hopefully create amazing things in our future, right? Like you said, as we're sitting there sipping on tea in our rocking chairs. But with all of this rapid advancement, I feel like there's also kind of this thin line, almost a give and take that we have of like innovation, but then also invasion when it comes to using that data, AI, especially with all the new tools and apps that are out there. Like how do schools, kind of keep that potential of AI in one place, but at the same time thinking about not compromising on student privacy, not compromising on that student agency that you just talked about too. So how do schools balance that?
It's tough, right? And this isn't a new conversation. We've been having the privacy conversation about edtech for as long as edtech's been in schools. I think the difference is, the granularity, like the pipeline of individual data that you can now get from AI into an edtech tool is vastly larger, right? You can literally count the number of times I blink if you want. And that's a lot of very personal data. I don't know what you do with the blinking data, but
Somebody's figuring something out.
So they had to figure that out. And so I think we have to realize that this is data collection on a level that we've never experienced before, and we're right to be concerned about that. And two, we've already created structures that help us manage these privacy issues in schools with other technologies. And so I think we can apply some of those strategies. Just a matter of, not collecting PII, helping young people learn digital citizenship skills to not share their personally identified information with those tools, keeping the data that we do use local, anonymizing the data or de-identifying the data. And, AI is just as good at de-identifying data as it is at collecting data, right? So these very tools that bring the new concern of the amount of data they can collect are also very powerful at wiping out the very things that we don't want them to have, right? So I think we need to not say, oh, we're going to have to box up AI and put it over there, or we can't touch it. I think we say, well, how do we use the power of AI to solve the problem that it creates?
That's a great point.
It's interesting. It's like we have this tool that's great, but it's also creating all these problems that we need to think about. It's like how do you use it, and it's constantly creating new problems that you constantly need to solve as you go through this process.
Yeah, and you think about any new technology. I took a Waymo ride for the first time.
Ooh, was that scary? Fun?
San Francisco. Well, it was. So for people who don't know, right, a Waymo is a driverless taxi. You call it with your phone, it pulls over, opens the door. That part was spooky and weird. You get in, and then it starts driving you away. And at first you're sort of white knuckling it, but within 5 minutes you're like, I think I'll check my email, right? Because in the end you're like, oh, it works. But there was a whole set of issues that people had to figure out before that technology could be sort of integrated. And I think of AI the same way. It's so powerful. It can change so fundamentally how we do things. And there's a whole new set of issues. But, in my mind, most of these issues are temporary. And I know it's easy to say that when you're living it. Yeah. But, 2-3 years, we're going to have ironed out a lot of this. And it's going to be a lot smoother and easier. And in fact, we're already seeing people integrate AI into mainstream tools like, Microsoft Word or Google Docs, to where we're not even going to really know when we're using it and when we're not. We're just going to know that the stuff works a lot better than it used to.
Yeah, I asked a bunch of teachers the other day if it was leadership, and I said, "How many of you have used AI?" And only about half raised their hand. I said, "All of your hands should be raised." And they're like, "What?" I was like, "Have you written an email in the last 5 years? I mean, essentially, it's doing the autocomplete for you, right? It's giving you the predictive text, and maybe you're not using a specific generative AI tool, but you're right. In 3 to 5 years, I think we're not even going to be seeking it out. I think it's just appearing, like you're saying, it's just going to be embedded. It's going to be folded in."
Yeah. And it's interesting, like if you look at Google, they have this, Learn LM, which is their specific engine that they're optimizing as a learning assistant. And I was speaking to them recently, and they told me that they're folding that straight into Gemini now.
Wow.
There's not even a reason for them to keep it separate. And so I think it's just what you said, Carl. We're just going to see these things folded into the tools we already use.
Wow, it's so much happening in education right now with technology, and I know ISTE and ASCD. For those who don't know, I'm also a board member as well, so I get the inside track on things.
Is that only?
I'm not gonna spill any beans just yet because Joseph's home.
Yeah, be careful.
Adam's eventually my boss, so you just tell me what to do.
There we go. See?
Yeah, there we go. So I know the org has rolled out its new transformational learning principles. So in a nutshell, how do these principles move us from teaching as usual? Back in the old days, we were talking about that earlier. Or our abacuses and slide rules.
Abacuses.
Abacuses.
Abaci. That's it. I think that's correct.
That sounds like an old world name. Like, yeah, my grandpappy abacus.
Abaci.
But how does this transformational learning principles move us from the teaching as usual to these new learning experiences that we're talking about?
Yeah. So, coming out of the pandemic and the AI revolution, we really started thinking deeply about what is at the core of teaching and learning, what's really going to prepare students for a world that's like AI infused. And I think the transformational learning principles takes there's nothing in here that we haven't talked about before, but I think it brings it together in a really compelling way. So one, we have 3 main categories: nurture, guide, and empower. And, just starting with nurture, I think a lot of people for the first time really understood how much mental health and mental well-being contributed to learning. If your student's not feeling confident, if they need to feel safe, they need to not be hungry, then they can learn. If those things are violated, then they can't. And so I think a new emphasis on nurturing, which includes creating a sense of belonging, but also connecting the learning to the learner, right? Like what the learner cares about and what they aspire to, I think is something that can make a huge difference for our schools. Guide, the second one, really talks about sparking curiosity and developing expertise. And, we use that word on purpose because so much of school is about knowledge acquisition and really knowledge transfer, right? Which is, essentially we're trying to pour the information from teacher head to student head. But the reason we use the word expertise is because expertise implies hands-on learning that sticks with you, right? And so I think that that's also a shift we need to make. Knowledge is an ingredient of expertise, but expertise is a lot more than that. And it's what employers are looking for, right? They need people who understand how to become an expert at something, not just who knows history, for example. Right. And then the third one, empower, is all about agency. This is, we're every new technology tends to open up agentic possibilities, right? It gives us more things we can do. When I was a kid, I was trying to edit a home movie in my VHS camera.
Yes. I did the same.
Oh, me too. I thought I was the one.
Right. And
rewind it, record over
it. Record on the shoulder, right? Yeah. And now I can literally do everything on my phone, right? Yeah. I mean, it's just like so my agency is just vastly expanded by that possibility. And AI is a whole nother level of agency, right? And so that idea of really understanding and building a school around encouraging and supporting and expanding student agency, I really think is transformational.
Yeah, I think I love that you pulled that. I love that nurture is such a big part of it. And I know that was the first one you mentioned, but thinking about before we came on the call, we were talking about the anxious generation, and the idea that we're overscheduled and there's a lot of things going on in our lives, and there's a lot of pushback. Like, we're living in too fast of times? But if you don't handle that nurture part first, I should say, and the culture that comes along with it, because I'm not just talking about the student learners, but also the adult learners, right? That really, right now I feel like they're just overwhelmed. I hear that a lot with teachers, and I don't blame them. There's this race to cover all of these standards, and we have all this new tech coming out, and all of this. My worry is, and my question for you is this: is like, how do we ensure that this next generation of students, has deeper expertise? And maybe it's through the TLPs that you just mentioned, versus just like, let's cover everything as far as we can and fast and wide as we can, but it's going to be very, an inch deep.
Right.
So how do we do more purpose driven when it comes to that expertise you're talking about?
I know I may be a little bit of an outlier on this one, but I think we need to shift the balance of time in school away from discipline-based knowledge acquisition to more integrated, hands-on, real-world problem solving. And, that requires knowledge too, right? I'm not saying that you don't need to know math or you don't need to be able to communicate, but I think if we shift our time over to projects with more meaning for students, then they'll pick up maybe not every last little bit that we would have taught them, but they'll learn it in a way that they'll remember it and that they can make a difference with it. One of the things that I think we underestimate is the engagement crisis in our schools, right? And this predates COVID, but if you look at a graph of student engagement from elementary school to high school, it just plummets, right? And so if we don't solve that problem, then we're wasting that time in school. And so I feel like sometimes we're like, oh, the kids are behind. We gotta double down. Reading, writing, right? Let's make them even more bored and close the walls even tighter on them, right? Instead of saying, well, what if we found out what they want to do in the world and used knowledge to help propel them towards it? And that's what I think the solution is.
I think there's time in there too, because I was thinking about my 7th grader way back when she was doing her 7th grade online virtually with the COVID years, and now she's a 10th grader, and she went to school the next year. I remember she was just at home and she would get everything done in like an hour and a half, and then she would go to school and it's 7 hours, and she would say, and she goes, Dad, I'm just bored out of my mind. I was like, it's just busy work. And I'm like, okay, so in one hand I hear like we're cramming all this stuff down, but on the other hand I feel like it's busy work, which to me would lend itself to what you were just saying. It's not authentic. It's not applicable to them and their interests. And so to their mind, it's like they're just making us go through the motions of school. So maybe there is opportunity for that. I'm with you. I don't feel like you're an outlier in that sense. I think the problem is that we're going to have to overcome 70 to 80 years of traditional pedagogical practice, which is hard. I mean, this is a huge boat to turn around, and there's a lot of disruption in this field right now. So I don't know if now's the time to do it, or maybe now is the time to do it, because
no, I actually think now is the time to do it, right? I mean, clearly states are feeling empowered at the moment.
Yeah.
And we've already seen a fragmentation of curriculum. State by state curriculum is really different now. I think the thing that will drive this or not drive it is the accountability system. But also, this is a time when it's likely that the accountability system will open up a little bit for states. And, states are already some states are showing interest in measuring what we call durable skills.
Yeah.
As a high school outcome, right? And that's stuff like communication and resilience and curiosity and creativity. And if that becomes a high school outcome, that will push you this direction in your pedagogy.
I mean, that's so true. Like, looking at these strategies and trying to figure out what's going to stick with the kids. It's all about that, to me, that hands-on thing. I know my daughter this past summer was in a engineering camp, and they built a maze with a marble and hydraulics using syringes. She came home every day talking about that and talking to me about pressure and the angles that they had to make sure it could go up or down. And it was so much math and engineering and science that went into that that she didn't even know she was learning math, science as she was doing this process, but it was embedded into the project. And it was one of those things where she was saying, I learned more in this week than I did this past year in school. Now, no shade to the school, but for her, it was something that stuck in her brain.
Right. And what if I told you that because she did that, she didn't have time to learn how to factor polynomials?
That's a shame.
How proud would you be as a parent, right?
Yeah.
But what you're getting at, Adam, here is something that I call purpose-driven expertise development. So it's this combination when you help a young person uncover their purpose, something that they care deeply about, but also has a social component to it, a pro-social component, and then helping them become an expert in that thing they care about. So I have a son who's like obsessed with wolves and has been his whole life. And he's really interested in wolf conservation to the point where he's reading the wolf conservation state plans of Colorado and, Montana at night, right? Nobody's assigned this to him. And it's like such a travesty to me that the school doesn't even know this about him, right? They have no idea they have a little wolf expert, walking around the hallways of their school. And I'm like, well, what if they did? What if schools knew these things and cared about them and created mechanisms where they could help him learn that way? I mean, the kid is basically mastered statistics. Why? Yeah. Because conservation of wolves is all about statistics, right? And so I think, as we said, there's a huge momentum. It's a huge shift. I'm not talking about something that happened overnight, but just your example, Adam, shows the potential of just putting a young person in an environment like that. And I just, if we could shift some more time towards it, I think we could get there.
So I'm thinking now too, is there maybe in the last couple of statements you just made is interesting. So assessment, we've talked about the high stakes is starting to reduce a little bit, which is good. It'll maybe open up some of these pathways. But at the same time, we have these durable skills, as you mentioned, that we need to also make sure our kids are getting. Do you think, or is this a bad idea? Do you think we should start assessing or figuring out ways to come up with some sort of holistic assessment on durable skills? And maybe that'll help drive us more toward, inviting that in schools. Although I get worried, the second we start throwing out assessments, we could be in big trouble.
Yeah. So this should be your next debate for your next podcast.
Okay.
Do we dare measure something that matters because it will get reduced to a checklist?
Oh,
right.
I know. It makes me feel bad.
Like, can you just imagine that they're like, oh, hey, Johnny got 95% on creativity.
Wait, how did you measure that? But only a 12 on collaboration.
Oh man. Yeah. So man, it's such a hard thing. I mean, we have to have some way of knowing where somebody. I would like us to come at this from a developmental perspective, not an assessment perspective.
Okay.
Right. And so if we talk in terms of developmental stages of creativity or collaboration, and where is this, person in their development of those capabilities, then I think we do need a way to have a sense of where they are. But man, I'm so nervous about making a
double-edged sword.
State assessment.
Man.
Yeah, it is.
Like you asked for it.
I know. I do think about this though. I know seriously, like this keeps me up at night because, it's something that you really want to do. But if it's bad enough that we've made math a monster, by the way we test it. And if we make creativity and collaboration a monster, then what have we done?
What do we got left? Yeah.
Well,
and don't get me started on that whole math thing. I was helping my daughter with her algebra, but I'm not even going to go there on that right now. So last question for you, Joseph. We ask all of our guests when they're on the show, because they're, you're a busy guy. You're all over the place. You're doing some amazing stuff. But what is something that you do to keep yourself undisrupted?
Oh, well, so my oldest child got me into indoor rock climbing. And then they left for college, which meant I had to find a partner, which felt like dating in my later years.
Is there an app? Is there an app for that where you can swipe to the rock climbing partner?
Yeah, the problem is that an app for that would work against me, right? Do you want to climb with the old guy? But I have been able to find other partners, and that's what I do. When you are rock climbing, you can't think about anything else, right? You're 30 feet up a wall, and you're thinking about what you're gonna grab next, and it's an awesome feeling.
Well, that rocks, man.
Oh,
No.
Wow.
Hey, you know what?
Easy, too easy.
Trying to make our way to the top. That's all it is, So, well, Joseph, by the way, that is good. I do like that idea that you and of finding something, a hobby, a skill, something that is out of your field of work, but then also, like you say, you have to devote your time, focus, energy, and attention to that one skill. So it takes away all the other things that are going on in the back of your mind. That's a great thing, and I applaud you for trying it. I will not be your partner because I will not climb anything that high, but I applaud you for trying it. What are some places, where can people find out more about you and the great work that you're doing?
Yeah, so, we have two awesome websites, ISTE.org and ASC.org. We're getting them together real soon here.
Do we have a tidbit you want to drop on the podcast right now?
But if you're looking for AI resources, ISTE.org/AI.
Okay.
And then the transformational learning principles, they're on both. Actually, if you just Google transformational learning principles, ISTE, they'll come right up.
We'll have the link in the details below.
All right.
Link in the show notes for sure. Check out those TLPs. Those are awesome. Yeah, I love that you guys are rolling those out. And again, expanding on the areas of where we really need to be focusing on in schools, especially with all the disruption that's coming our way, right, Adam? So thank you so much, by the way, for joining us, Joseph. And also to our listeners out there, be sure to subscribe and give us a review. If you give us a shout out, we might even put it out on a future show. You never know. Hasn't happened yet. We've had a couple we've done out on the show before. This has been the UnDisrupted Podcast, brought to you by All for Ed. He's Adam, and you can follow him at AskAdam3.
And he's Carl, and you can follow him at edtech. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, we are better together.
And we are better UnDisrupted.